He had everything: power, victory, the love of a nation. And then, one quiet evening, one glance destroyed everything. Jerusalem was glowing under the orange light of sunset. The city breathed peace after years of war. Musicians played in the streets. Children laughed near the markets. And high above them all, King David stood alone on the rooftop of his palace. The same David who killed Goliath. The same shepherd boy chosen by God. The same warrior women once sang about in the streets. Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. He had become a legend. But legends can fall too. David should have been at war. Kings usually led their armies into battle during spring, but this time, he stayed behind. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he felt untouchable. Maybe success had made him careless. Below the palace walls, a woman bathed beneath the evening sky. Her name was Bathsheba. Beautiful, graceful, unaware that the most powerful man in Israel was watching her. And in that single moment, David stopped being a king and became a man ruled by desire. He stared too long. Then came the question that changed everything. Who is she? One servant hesitated before answering. My lord, that is Bathsheba, wife of Uriah the Hittite. A warning, clear as thunder. She belonged to another man, and not just any man. Uriah was one of David's most loyal soldiers, a warrior willing to die for his king. David knew this, but temptation has a strange way of making people deaf, especially powerful people, especially lonely people, especially people who think nobody will ever find out. Bring her to me. And just like that, a line was crossed. The palace doors closed behind Bathsheba that night, and when morning came, nothing looked different. The sun still rose, birds still sang, the kingdom still stood strong. But hidden sin always feels small in the beginning, like a spark in dry grass. Weeks passed. Then a message arrived at the palace, short, simple, terrifying. I am pregnant. David froze. For the first time in years, the fearless king felt fear crawl into his chest. Not fear of enemies, fear of exposure, fear of shame, fear of losing the image everyone believed about him. And that fear would make him far more dangerous than temptation ever did. Because one mistake usually leads to another, and another, and another. In downtown Chicago, 3,000 years later, Marcus Reed stared at his phone in silence. 42 years old, CEO of a billion-dollar tech company, magazine covers, private jets, a perfect family on Instagram. People called him the modern success story. But at that exact moment, his world was cracking open. A text message blinked on his screen. I can't hide this anymore. I'm pregnant. Marcus closed his eyes. His hands trembled. Not because he didn't know who sent it, but because he knew exactly what it could destroy. His wife, his children, his company, his reputation. And suddenly, a man who controlled thousands of employees couldn't control his own heartbeat. Just like David. The secret was no longer a secret. Back in Jerusalem, David began searching for a solution. Not repentance, not confession, a cover-up. He called for Uriah to return from battle. When Uriah arrived, dust covered from war, David smiled like an old friend. "How is the battle? How are the men? How is Joab?" David acted casual, calm, normal. Then finally, "Go home. Rest. Be with your wife." It sounded kind, generous even. But David wasn't being kind. He was trying to hide the pregnancy. If Uriah slept with Bathsheba, everyone would assume the child belonged to him. Problem solved. Or so David thought. But that night, Uriah never went home. He slept outside the palace gates with the servants. When David heard this, panic tightened around his throat. The next morning he asked, "Why didn't you go home?" Uriah answered with honor that cut like a knife. "The ark and Israel are staying in tents. My fellow soldiers are risking their lives in battle. How could I go home and enjoy comfort with my wife?" David looked at him silently, because in that moment, the loyal soldier stood more righteous than the king himself. Still, David refused to stop. That night he invited Uriah to dinner. Wine flowed. Laughter filled the room. David kept refilling Uriah's cup, trying to weaken his judgment, trying to push him home. But even drunk, Uriah slept outside again. And now, David faced a terrifying truth. The lie wasn't working. And desperate people do desperate things. Marcus sat in his luxury penthouse overlooking the city lights. Rain hit the windows softly. But inside, everything felt loud. His lawyer leaned forward carefully. There's still time to control the narrative. Control the narrative. That's what powerful people call hiding the truth. Marcus rubbed his face slowly. "What are my options?" The lawyer hesitated, then lowered his voice. "If this leaks, shareholders panic. The board may replace you. Your sponsors disappear overnight." Marcus stared out the window. Then came the question, the dangerous question. What if she signed something? Silence filled the room, because deep down, he already knew. He wasn't trying to fix the mistake. He was trying to protect himself. And once protecting image becomes more important than protecting truth, people cross lines they once swore they never would. Back in Jerusalem, David wrote a letter. A death sentence disguised as military orders. He sealed it with the king's authority, then handed it to Uriah himself. Imagine that. A loyal man carrying the letter that would kill him without knowing it. David's instructions were cold. Place Uriah at the front where the fighting is fiercest, then pull back from him. No sword in David's hand. No public execution. Just strategy. Clean. Quiet. Hidden. Or so he hoped. Days later, the battle exploded against the city walls. Arrows rained from above. Steel clashed against steel. Men screamed in chaos. And right where the fighting was worst, Uriah stood abandoned. The enemy surrounded him. Then, he fell. Far away in Jerusalem, a messenger ran toward the palace. David already knew what the message would say. But hearing it out loud still changed something inside him. Uriah the Hittite is dead. Silence, heavy silence. Then David nodded slowly, as if it were just another casualty of war. But heaven had seen everything. The rooftop, the affair, the lies, the manipulation, the murder. Nothing hidden remains hidden forever. Bathsheba mourned her husband, and after the mourning period, David brought her into the palace as his wife. To the public, everything looked resolved. The king appeared merciful. The scandal disappeared before it even began. Life moved on. But one sentence changed the atmosphere forever. But what David had done displeased the Lord. And when God is silent, people often mistake that silence for approval. Weeks passed peacefully. Then one day, a prophet named Nathan walked into the palace. David welcomed him warmly. He had no idea judgment had arrived. Nathan began with a story. There were two men in one city, one rich, one poor. The rich man had many sheep and cattle, but the poor man had only one little lamb. Nathan's voice softened. He raised it like a daughter. It ate from his table, slept in his arms. David listened carefully. Then Nathan continued. One day a traveler visited the rich man, but instead of taking from his own flock, he stole the poor man's lamb and killed it. David exploded with rage. That man deserves to die. His fists clenched. His face burned with anger. And then, Nathan looked directly into the king's eyes. You are the man. The room fell silent. No music, no movement, just truth. Raw truth. David's chest tightened, because suddenly, every hidden thing stood exposed. Not before the people, before God. Nathan continued, God gave you everything. The throne, victory, blessings. And if that wasn't enough, he would have given you more. So why did you despise him? David couldn't speak. For the first time since the rooftop, the weight of his sin truly hit him. Not as a scandal, not as bad publicity, but as betrayal. And brokenness finally entered the heart of a king. In New York, Marcus stood backstage before a live interview. Makeup artists moved around nervously. His PR manager whispered instructions. Stick to the statement, deny personal questions, stay calm. Millions were watching. Rumors had already exploded online. Screens everywhere flashed headlines. Tech billionaire facing secret affair allegations. His wife sat at home, watching alone. His teenage daughter refused to answer her phone. His son skipped school because classmates mocked him online. And suddenly, Marcus realized something terrifying. Sin never stays personal. It spreads. Like fire through dry fields. One choice can wound generations. The interviewer smiled politely, then asked the question everyone waited for. Marcus, is the affair true? And for a moment, the entire world seemed to stop. Back in Jerusalem, David finally broke. I have sinned against the Lord. No excuses, no blame, no image management, just truth. Painful truth. And something extraordinary happened. The warrior king who defeated giants was finally defeated by himself. Tears filled his eyes. His voice cracked. The palace felt colder than ever before. Because repentance is painful. Real repentance destroys pride before it heals the soul. Nathan told David, God has forgiven you, but consequences would still come. Because forgiveness does not erase damage. And that's the part many people never talk about. The child born from David and Bathsheba became terribly sick. Day after day, the baby weakened. David stopped eating. He lay on the ground through the nights, praying, crying, begging God for mercy. Servants whispered nervously outside the room. They had never seen the mighty king like this before. Broken, helpless, human. 7 days later, the child died. Silence filled the palace again. The servants were terrified to tell David, but he noticed their whispers, their faces, their fear. And he understood immediately. The baby was gone. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then David slowly stood up, washed his face, changed his clothes,
and walked into the house of God to worship.
Not because he understood everything, but because grief had finally stripped away his illusions. He was still king, but now he knew power cannot protect a man from the consequences of sin. Years later, David's family would fracture with violence, betrayal, rebellion, and heartbreak. The sword never fully left his house, because private sin creates public pain. Marcus stared into the camera, millions watching, his entire empire balancing on a sentence. And finally, he exhaled slowly. Yes. The interviewer froze. Yes, it's true. No rehearsed denial, no legal spin, just confession. And instantly, social media exploded. Sponsors vanished, stocks crashed. News anchors tore him apart. People who once praised him now mocked him. But later that night, Marcus sat alone in the dark for the first time in years. No cameras, no meetings, no applause. And strangely, for the first time in months, he could breathe again. Because secrets are heavy, and pretending is exhausting. David would later write words that echoed through history. Create in me a clean heart, O God. Renew a right spirit within me. Not the prayer of a perfect man, the prayer of a broken one. And maybe that's why this story still hits people thousands of years later. Because everyone knows what temptation feels like. Everyone knows the fear of being exposed. Everyone knows the damage one bad decision can cause. Some people lose marriages. Some lose careers. Some lose peace. Some lose themselves. And the terrifying part is, it usually starts small. One look, one message, one secret conversation, one moment nobody else sees, until suddenly, everything burns. But this story is not only about failure. It's about what happens after failure. Because David fell horribly, yet he still returned to God. Not as a flawless king, but as a humbled man. And maybe someone listening tonight feels exactly like that. You've been hiding something, pretending, smiling in public, breaking in private. And you keep thinking, if people find out, it's over. But the real danger is not being exposed. The real danger is refusing to face the truth. Because hidden darkness grows, but confessed darkness loses power. David's greatest victory was not killing Goliath. It was finally admitting, I was wrong. And maybe that's where healing begins. Not in pretending to be perfect, but in finally becoming honest. Because a single moment of weakness can destroy a life. But one moment of true repentance can still save a soul.